Welcome back to Paperback Ponderings, and today we have a very exciting episode because we have Juliette Cross joining us. Welcome to the podcast, Juliette.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here.
We are so happy to have you. And for anybody listening who is maybe not familiar with Juliette's work, she is the author of Firebird and the upcoming Bloodsinger, which will be out by the time this episode is posted. So that's very exciting. But if you're not familiar, Firebird is set in a world inspired by ancient Rome, but if all of the noble-blooded Romans were dragon shifters. So the story follows Julian, who is a general in the Roman army known as the Cold-Hearted Conqueror, and also the nephew to the emperor. Yet, after one particular battle, he sees a Dacian woman from the defeated enemy's side being held captive by his men, and he recognizes her from a night a few years prior where he watched her dance on stage and was captivated by her beauty. So instinctively, when he sees her being harmed by his men, he shifts into dragon form and flies her away to his home, where, by Roman law, she becomes his slave. But she remembers him too from that night a few years ago, and even though she should be afraid, she can't help but feel drawn to him. So, just a little heads up before we get started for anybody listening. We are going to do our best to avoid spoilers for the two books, but we will have to talk a little bit about the characters for book two. It's a series of standalones in terms of the character relationships, so we will be spoiling the characters for book two. If you are not ready for that, maybe come back and listen at a different time. But aside from that, let's get into it. Juliette, can you tell us a little bit about your path to becoming an author?
Oh my goodness. Okay. Well, how far back are we going?
All the way.
Oh gosh. When I was 5, no. Well, I've always been a daydreamer. It's kind of funny. I think I even mentioned this at a panel once that my first grade teacher gave me really poor marks because I was always daydreaming. So I've always just sort of been in my head, and I think it's interesting that now if Miss Newman could see me, she'd be very proud of me. Use that daydreaming quality, to some good. But I would say I've always been sort of drawn to stories and to writing. But I had a 10th grade teacher. It's the first one who asked us to write a short story in class. And I can't remember exactly what it was about. It was just like some southern scene, but I remember the feeling. I remember the feeling that I had. And it was almost just like magic. I'd never imagined my own characters and put them in a scene, and it literally just gripped me. So I ended up going to school and majored in creative writing. I ended up going to grad school, and I actually took a class with Ernest J. Gaines. I don't know if y'all are familiar with him. He wrote Miss Jane Pittman and A Lesson Before Dying. They're very prominent Southern stories. Great Southern writer. And then I went into teaching, and I kind of set it aside for a while and raised my family. And then as my children started to get older, that pull toward writing came back to me. And I was riding home to see my parents. I remember this very vividly. And I go through a lot of country back roads. I'm in South Louisiana. There's lots of sugarcane fields and old oak trees. So it's very picturesque. And when I'm driving to my parents, I use that time just to think about things. So I had this image of this girl in an elevator with her best friend. And it was her birthday. I think it was 20th or 21st birthday. And they go to this club in New Orleans, and she goes outside and she sees a man, a really attractive man, of course, pulling a demon out of a human, like pulling him out. And this is like sort of a pre-apocalypse story, and that's where Forge and Fire, my very first book, came from. And from then on, I had the bug. I have always been drawn to reading, and romance has always been a part of that. Nalini Singh is one of my idols, and I read her series, the Psy Changeling series, and it's inspired me a lot. I love the way she used these fantasy worlds to teach really good lessons. I guess that's the teacher in me. It's never going to leave me. I am still a teacher, as I was mentioning before we started the show. And so, yeah, I just couldn't stop writing, and I haven't.
Love that. What about this series in particular? What was the inspiration for this one?
Okay, The Fire That Binds. Well, I am one of those people who is very intrigued by Rome. And do y'all remember that HBO series several years ago called Rome? And it's all about Julius Caesar. I just find the politics fascinating and the culture itself. And so for me, it was all about, you have this really sophisticated culture of the Romans, right? I mean, they have indoor plumbing, they have heated water and baths, in these elaborate, beautiful homes they've created. There's philosophy, there's art. And then they're also storming across the world, killing and conquering people. So there's this like really vicious, savage side juxtaposed against this very sophisticated side. And so to me, I was like, this would be the perfect kind of society to put, like, what if they were dragon shifters? And what if that is how they were able to really conquer the world, and burn their way across it? And it makes them even more unbeatable, more dominant and more scary. And so, and of course I love enemies to lovers. And so I was like, well, I need, a hero on one side and the heroine on the other, because that's, to me, what makes an interesting story. Because anytime you look at any culture in history, even in reality, if we look at historically things that have happened in our own past, like World War II, if we look at the Nazis and stuff, not every German was like that. There were Germans there who were good people caught up in the mix, and so you can't just say the entire race or the entire people are bad or wrong. It was, those in charge or those who were using their own power for evil. And so that is how this sort of came about, was that we have Julian, who is, he is the nephew to the emperor, and his mother was actually a slave, was an ex-slave. And so right away, we know that his heart isn't in this sort of cruel, tyrannical way that his uncle is. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So yeah. And then of course we have Melina, who is completely outside in a different country. Dacia is modern day Romania. That's where that is now. And that is one of the people that the Romans conquered.
Yeah, it worked so well, because you're so right that, like, already they're such big conquerors, the Romans, that looking at something like dragon shifters, that's just, you would feel so beaten down as the opposition, because how do you beat a dragon, like an army of dragons?
You can't. So then, okay, so I also love myths. So mythology is a big part. If you read any of my darker fantasies, you're going to probably find a myth or a song or a tale or something in there, because I just love, because that's what really makes up a culture, right? And in this case, for the Romans, what we call mythology was their religion. So it was even more, a part of who they were. And I always was angered by the story of Medusa, the myth of Medusa. She's violated and raped by Poseidon or Neptune, Greek or Roman, whichever version you read, in the Temple of Athena. And then she's punished by becoming a monster, and it's like, okay, this doesn't quite make sense. Obviously a man wrote that myth. So I wanted to retell that story. Medusa actually has two sisters. And so that's why we have this trilogy, and each one of them is given a gift by Athena in my retellings. So their power, which is goddess given, is what is going to help them fight the dragons.
Yes, that is one of my favorite things that just connects the first two so far, is this kind of sisterly bond of magic from the goddess, and the empowerment of the sisters and the slaves throughout the two books. Very well done.
Yes, thank you. I'm so excited for y'all to read the last one too. I finished writing Death Rider, which is book 3 already. It's my editor. Okay. So I think readers are going to be really excited as how it all plays out. So
we are very excited, and we want to ask you more about the third one a little bit later, though. We'll keep it for the end.
After the recording.
I really appreciated, it's funny that those are the things that you brought up, because the myth writing in the book, but then also the sisterly topic and the idea of politics and power politics specifically. And we got to see a different take on that power dynamic by having, because often you see like war and conquering, and we got some of that, but we also got to see a little bit more intimately like conquering within the house and within like social hierarchy too. So that really did come through during the book in both like Melina and Julian's perspective in different ways, which I thought was really interesting, right? You have two people operating in a system constrained by that system with very different levels of power that are still struggling against the system and still oppressed by the system. And I thought that was really interesting, actually, to see that from Julian's perspective as well. Like, to have that oppression still visible, even when you are as high as the Emperor's nephew.
I'm so glad you pointed that out, because that carries on even more so into book 2 as well. And I did want to show that, you know, they're all oppressed. If you're living under a tyrant, everyone beneath him is being oppressed in some way. And of course, Igniculus is like the most foul, tyrannical emperor I could probably come up with. I fashioned him after Caligula, but I made him even worse than Caligula. And from Roman history. But I think it's important to see that even people, so again, I think of history, you know, and there are parts in our own history where there are people in power who really are powerless in some ways. You know, they have to play the game, or they could get killed, or their family could get killed, or, you know, they could be shipped off or sent somewhere or whatever. I mean, we've seen that in real life history, you know, and so I was trying to reflect that, but just dialing it up a bit, because if the emperor, the one in charge, is extremely powerful and a deadly dragon and will not hesitate to kill you, then it's more than just being a little bit afraid that, you know, you might go to jail or you might go to prison. It's a different, you know, kind of danger or fear, I guess I should say. You know, and so we do see that for not just for Melina and obviously all of the slaves and the plebeians who live, the humans who live in the city of Rome, but even the senators and the other dragons themselves. And that's what I was going to kind of mention. We kind of see that at the feast with Otho, one of the senators has upset him. And I'm not going to say what happens, but that scene, it's funny, a good friend of mine, Naima Simone, always says that scene, you know, at the feast, you know, when we talk about it, it wasn't just to be gratuitous or for some grotesque titillation or whatever. It was to show how he wields his power to humiliate and to control others, you know, because I think that's the way real people in power who are evil and have wicked intent do it, you know. So maybe not as drastically as he did, but
yeah, well, just like it's not just imprisonment or even death. It's like there are a multitude of ways that you can be controlled on the sidelines without people realizing.
And it's not just like outright acts. It's also the ramifications of the social readjusting that happens after something like that, where everyone knows it's wrong. Everyone knows that this is not pleasant, but at least it's not me. At least it's not that I'm not the one in that position.
It feels realistic, you know, like if you look at the real world, it's like that's where I feel like this fantasy feels more realistic, and or at least I hope that was my intention. But it's gonna all pay in the end. It's gonna be fine. I promise.
I have so many questions about the end, and it's so hard not to ask.
Yeah. So obviously inspired by ancient Rome. Obviously, the dragons were not actually there in ancient Rome. And you do mention in your author's note, like it's not totally factual. You took some liberties with the
I don't
world
want historians coming after me, you know.
Yeah. But that being said, like, did you do research on ancient Rome for developing that world? How did you adapt it? What did the research process look like, if so?
Yeah. So interestingly, I had already I already knew a lot about Rome itself. I'd actually studied some Cicero in college and things like that because I'm just one of those weird people that studies, like, just, goes off on tangents and learns about Roman philosophers. But it wasn't the politics or the culture or any of that I really had to research. And the mythology, I actually had been teaching it for years, so I knew that really well. It was the details. It was the everyday life things to really make it feel vibrant. I already knew that in the forum that is where they would have what they call kind of like the town crier or the praetor. That is his technical name. He would shout out the news of what's happening, there in Rome and abroad, what's happening with the armies, the military. I knew that that's also where a lot of business took place. They sold and bought cattle. They sold and bought slaves. Those things were all going on. But I was like, but I don't know, like, what does it smell like besides, sweat and feces from cows or whatever they're selling. So those kinds of things, I would go and find details. I'm like, oh, they would sell, bottled oils of lavender and things like that. And so it just gave a little bit more realism to it. And there was another scene I remember, and it's not a big plot scene or anything. So I think I can share this. I needed a scene for Melina to talk to Stephanos, a domestic scene at the house. And I needed sort of a quiet scene where she learns a little bit more about him. She learns a little bit more about Julian and what he's really like, who is this man who has brought me here to Rome. And so I was trying to figure out, well, what would they be doing? I don't think she would just be like helping him in the stables. And so I did a little bit of research and discovered that at one point in history, they didn't all bring their grains to a granary, to have it milled. A lot of times they use what was called a quern stone. And I'm not even sure if I pronounced that correctly. I know how to spell it, but I don't know about pronunciation, where they would grind it. They had this small grinder they would use at home. And so I was like, oh, well, that's perfect. They could be taking turns grinding, the grain for the cook. So things like that. Those were the things that I needed to discover more closely so that when you stepped into the world, you felt like you were in Rome,
Yeah. Yeah. It is crazy how many details there are that you might have a really great picture of what that culture and society looked like, but the everyday details of like, where did they go to the bathroom, like what kind of coins did they use.
Exactly, like you need to know those things. And I think you see more of that in Bloodsinger. And even that they had something, I was like, well, where do they go for medicine? Oh, a pharmacopolis, that's a real thing. They would have these herbalists, like it's an apothecary basically to get drugs and whatnot. For Bloodsinger, I had to look up certain drugs, like what would women use if they didn't want to get pregnant or have a baby, those kinds of things, birth control. So that was interesting. That was interesting stuff that like for everyday people. And it really helped me immerse myself in the world as well the more I read about these details. So that was fun stuff. I loved it. Absolutely. And for book 3 as well.
Yes, we have, I think, a little bit of a setting change for book 3. No spoilers. So, so that should bring some exciting new stuff, but won't linger on book 3 too much right now.
Yeah, we gotta get through 1 and 2 first.
Yes.
I would say that throughout the course of the books, like I did learn these things too. And there were a couple moments, because sometimes, especially when you're reading fantasy, I have to remind myself that it's fantasy and it might not actually be real. Like
I would have totally made that up, and I couldn't. Well,
exactly. You see often in fantasy books, like birth control is actually just like this magical thing that they deal with.
Yes.
So there were moments where I did have to like Google and verify for myself because I felt like I was learning things.
You fact checked me? I love it. I love that.
I just wanted to know. I was like, oh, is that a real thing? Or is this like a made up thing? Because it's a fantasy book. So I had those moments.
Oh my God. I don't know why. I love that.
But I feel like I learned something about Roman culture.
Yeah, me too, for sure. Yeah, because it's one of those things, like everybody has heard of the Roman Empire. Everybody knows generally like gladiators and Caesar.
Yes.
But beyond that, how much do people really know? And
like what they ate. Like that was fun. I love setting scenes with food, of course, because I love food. I'm from South Louisiana, so we love food. But Yeah, so I love finding all the different kinds of like delicacies, and they didn't use sugar. They use honey on anything for sweet, and so I always have like honeyed figs or something in there. Obviously I have a little bit of a sweet tooth, but it was really fun to write those scenes to just bring you in, like, oh, okay, I could imagine that, I can see that.
Yeah. I remember reading, I think it was like honey glazed dates or something, and I
Yeah.
have dates in my fridge and I was like, should I try that? Like
Totally
really
should.
immerse myself?
The answer is yes. Yeah.
I love
I
it.
was gonna say, like, the food specifically, the preparation for the Rite of Skulls in
Yes.
Firebird, I was just like the descriptions of the food actually genuinely made me want to eat like a Mediterranean diet. Like, I was like,
Right?
oh,
And
this
it's so
is
healthy.
nice.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, like so. And then I started thinking, oh, like they didn't really have sauces and stuff. They just had like the essence of the food and the way. And then I was like,
Right.
I feel like it would have been such an interesting time to be a cook and to
Right?
and to learn about
Well,
all
they
these
didn't-
different seeds and stuff and
Yeah,
the
and they
ways to
didn't,
bring flavor.
they didn't really use forks. Like they used their bread. They used their hands, and they would use the bread to scoop up things and wrap in things, and which I don't know. It's just like so cool. I don't know why that's cool to me, but it was like a simple way of eating. And of course they lounged. They would lounge and eat. I'm like, okay, that sounds great. You know?
Yeah.
But the thing you always have to remember is that the people that are making these elaborate things for the aristocrats or the slaves, so their life is very different. And I liked going back and forth between what it looked like for Julian and what it looked like for Melina. And I know it's a sensitive topic for a lot of people. Some people don't really want to go there, because it feels realistic, or that she's in this house of slavery. But for me, if I'm writing a story, and this is what the overarching theme of this series is, I'm writing a series about female empowerment, ending the patriarchy, and fighting back, for those who can't fight for themselves. And in order to do that, it's like if she was only on the outside looking in, we never really know what it's like for those inside. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so for us to know how bad it really is, she has to be there. She has to be in there. And so that's why it was so important. Like I didn't want her to just be like with a band of Celts the whole time fighting with the Romans. She needed to be in the city and show us what that feels like,
Yeah.
And so that's why that was so important. And though Julian is her owner, he does that to protect her. He doesn't ever treat her the way others would treat their slaves, which we learn in book 2.
That was something with book 2, especially because we see an even deeper perspective of what a slave might go through, and it just really resonated with me, that character's journey and how she had so much, like, even though we see Melina in captivity as well, she never had it quite as badly. And
no, not even close.
Not even close. And yeah, so we got even deeper into that, and it really stuck with me.
I don't know why this just popped in my head when you said that, but it reminds me a little bit of like Sansa and Arya in Game of Thrones. Sansa's like, you have no idea what I've been dealing with here.
Yeah.
It's like, whatever. Yeah, you've just been trooping around, playing sword player or whatever. I've been dealing with this asshat.
Yeah, exactly.
But,
very different lived experiences.
Yeah. It's so funny. I'm so proud of Leela, though. I'm just so proud of her. This was probably the most emotional character I feel like I've ever written, because she came from such a dark place at the beginning.
Yeah.
And I didn't want us to linger there too long, and I couldn't let her linger there too long. So don't worry if you're just listening to this, like, we're not in the darkness forever with Leela. But her transformation and finding her powers and really coming into her own is one of the finale climax scene, which I'm not going to say what happens, was one of my favorite scenes to write. It's just cathartic, right?
Yes. Yeah, there was a line that touched on the 3 people that she felt that she had been, like, before, during, and after kind of thing, and it was so powerful to see that growth journey for her and just see her be strong. I loved her.
Step into herself, her potential.
Yeah.
Would you say that Leela was your favorite character to write? And if not, who was your favorite? Can you pick one? Do you have a favorite?
I hate when you all ask these things. Oh, you see this. I will say that I don't. I can't have a favorite. I really can't, because when I go into the stories, I become that person. Like, I write as if I'm that person in my head. I'm experiencing what they're experiencing. But I will say, I think Bloodsinger is a better book than Firebird. And the reasons I think it's better beyond, I mean, I feel like the pace is picking up. It's not just like a filler story between 1 and 3. There's a lot going on politically, but it's Leela that I love so much about Bloodsinger. It's coming from a place of serious pain, living a life of pain and powerlessness, and coming to a point where she is so powerful. She is so powerful in the end, and that she has a man that doesn't make her better or save her because she doesn't really need it, but just supports her and gives her a reason to trust again. Because for a while she doesn't have that. And to me, that when you don't trust others, that is just such a place of loneliness. You know, I feel like Leela has been alone for so long, and so I think that's why I love this book and her so much, because she doesn't in the end. She feels all of the love, as she should.
With Leela and Trajan's relationship, you really did justice to healing in terms of being able to love somebody again and trust somebody again and open yourself up to that experience again after experiencing trauma. Like, it developed at a really believable and realistic and just good way that honored what she had been through. So I loved that about their relationship.
Thank you. I'm glad. We had a sensitivity reader for this one specifically because of that, for Leela. And so I was kind of waiting, anticipating, you know, maybe there were some scenes I went too far, or maybe there's some scenes, you know, kind of waiting to see what she thought. And she wrote me the loveliest letter, and how she absolutely loved their story and how it unfolded, and how, you know, it made me feel so good. I'm like, oh my gosh, I did it right. You know, I did it right. Because it's so funny, because somebody else had mentioned, I think recently, who'd read the arc, that it was a slow burn. I'm like, well, are you kidding me? What else could it be? Like,
it has to be.
Yeah.
When you see where Leela is in the beginning, I mean, and if you read that final chapter in Firebird, you know it cannot be a fast burn. Sorry.
Yeah, no, it needed to be slow burn.
Or people with some serious trauma. We need to give her time and space.
Yeah, let's give some healing time.
So, with the characters, did you have any character that kind of developed differently than you had originally anticipated or intended for them? Somebody that surprised you?
I think the one who surprised me the most was Fausta. And again, I will not say what happens with her. But originally, when I first started to write her in Firebird, I intended her to be just this malicious, aristocratic woman intending to either just like cause some angst and agony between Julian and Melina by trying to flirt with him and get with him. And maybe the Emperor was going to push her on him because he wants Julian married and to have an heir and for their bloodline to continue, all this kind of stuff. And then when I went back to my draft, I was like, no, I think that's very typical, you know, of the wicked female coming in to try to learn. I'm like, no, what if she's not? What if she's totally not that? What if she's pretending that she's completely the opposite? Yeah. And so that's where it kind of developed. I knew she was going to be important in Bloodsinger. I just didn't know quite how. And so when I finished Firebird, I'm like, okay, she's going to play a part in book 2. I just didn't know how yet. So that really surprised me because she became very important in book 2.
That's really cool to hear that she started out differently like that. Because, yeah, she was a character that also I didn't see her coming in the way that she did. And
because that's what I intended. I wanted y'all to think she was kind of like, oh, look at this bitch. Trying to snuggle up on Julian, whatever, you know.
Yeah.
But,
yeah, she was a territorial character.
And I think it fits as well with the, like, again, what we were talking about earlier, which is like these people are operating in a broken system as well, right? Yes. And they're doing what they can to survive and make it through. And so it creates just like more of a dynamic character arc when you can almost empathize with the person you initially hated. That's what's amazing as an author, right? Like,
oh my gosh, I love you so much. Yes. that was what I intended, and I love that you got that. I love the way you said broken system, because that is a really good way to look at it. They're very broken.
So, okay, I've got to ask, did you have a favorite between the two men that we've met so far, Julian and Trajan? If you had to pick for yourself, maybe.
So my husband is both of them. So he's like, broody alpha E sometimes, which is Julian, and then like kind of the charming jokester, which is Trajan. So I don't know. I love them both. I would probably lean toward Julian, but to be honest, it would be the hero of book 3. If any of them, it would be the hero of book 3 that I would choose.
Oh, that's exciting. Now you have us even more on the hook.
Man.
Like, who is he?
Yeah. Who is he? Where did he come from?
Well, you already know, so, but I'm not going to tell you. You already know.
Okay.
A little spoiler.
What about the ladies? If you could choose between having Melina's empath power or Leela's Bloodsinger abilities.
Leela.
It's pretty cool.
I want to cause mayhem and destruction. But also, again, like book 3's power is even cooler, I think, than Leela's. It's funny because I consider myself probably more of an empath person. I'm a Cancer, so we feel everything. So I'm more probably like Melina personally, but I would love to have Leela's power. I feel like that's really badass. So
super badass, like very epic power.
Yeah. I love it when you ask these kinds of questions, Kyla, because it immediately makes me start thinking, like, what would I want? What would I
pick? Yeah.
Well, what would y'all want? Y'all tell me. What would you want?
I think in our society, Melina's power would be really useful. Like, it would be really nice to be able to tell people's intentions around you and stuff.
Yes.
Like, I don't know how much I would be bleeding and ordering people around in my daily life. But if I was in a fantasy world, I would pick Leela's power.
Yeah, I think that's a good answer.
I think I'd probably pick Melina's, to be honest.
Oh, yeah?
Oh, yay.
Simply because I like, I don't know. I think I'd like the idea of like the more of a mental connection, I suppose. And yeah, anticipating people's motivations or people's like essence. Imagine how easy life would be, or easier to be able to discern very quickly if someone's a friend or a foe. Not that like we live in a bloodthirsty society.
Well, but we do live in a world where there's lots of false faces, and I think especially in this age of social media, people put on a certain front or act a certain way, and you really don't know them. You don't really... or there are people who are accused of being such and such and this and that, and then that's not how they are at all, and so you're right. I think that would be a good power. Now you're making me rethink my decision. But yeah, I love that. And I think you're right. I think the fact that she can tether in a way emotionally and mentally makes she can be more intimate with those people, that she chooses to bond herself to. So
yeah,
I love this whole conversation. Let's just wish we could get those powers.
Yeah, and the men, to be honest. If I had to choose, I think for the other question, it's tough because they're both so great, but I love Julian's alpha personality. I just love him a lot. Yeah.
I do too. That broody, growly, that's typically my favorite kind of hero in romance that I read.
Me too. Yep.
I've got to say the opposite. I don't know.
You like the charming, sweet one.
I like the charming, like the one that's socially aware, but also able to keep a front up in the sense that like nobody expects him to be the mastermind. You know what I mean? Nobody expects him to be.
That's true too, though. I love writing Trajan in a way that people think he's just this, whatever. He's like, Gaius's grandson. He's this privileged, whatever, tribune now. And really he is orchestrating everything, like more so than Julian. You know,
Yeah.
he is really
Yeah.
good. And I love that he gets to play that role. You know, when he's always been sort of a step beneath Julian as far as hierarchy and in the military and everything else. In reality, he's the one who has all the political ties. Julian, like you said, he has hierarchy because of who he is. He's the emperor. But Trajan has the ability to work people, to manipulate people.
Yes.
That's crucial, especially in this political intrigue world in Rome and stuff. But,
Yeah. I don't know what that says about
I'm
me,
going to be
though.
so sad to leave this world, y'all. Like, so sad.
Oh, we're gonna be sad when it's over.
Yes. Because, I mean, I wrote Death Rider, but I still have heavy edits to do. I know I'm going to add some more scenes and stuff, but I may shed a tear when I have to step away from creating anything new there. But, yeah.
How do you process that evolution as an author in terms of kind of closing the chapter on a significant part of your life? I've always thought about this because as a reader, I mean, I'm the type of reader who will finish a series and cry about it for days.
Yeah.
Like even thinking about it makes me emotional. Some of the big series that I've read in my years of reading, where I think back and I like go into an actual depression after I finish certain, stories. Like I could not imagine doing that from your perspective, who creates this world, who puts so much into the creation of the world. Like how do you process that?
I cry. But I actually do get pretty emotional about it. Just writing the final scene that I've been waiting to write. So here's the thing about me as a writer, and everybody has different processes. I know some have all these sticky notes and color coded, and I'm gonna slot this scene in here and like all this stuff. I can't write like that. I'm a linear writer, so I will go from the first scene all the way through. I will not skip a scene. I will not skip a sex scene or an action scene or whatever. I have to be in it. I have to be exactly where the character is for the emotions to come out on the page properly, I guess. That's how I feel. Like it's playing like a movie, right? So for me, I'm not gonna pause it and jump to the end and then come back. Like I just personally can't. So what happens, I will, of course, be thinking about the next book and how it's all going to end. So I knew what the final scene was going to be ages ago, like honestly years ago. And so when I finally got to write it, my heart was pounding. Like I was just like, and then I had that sort of cathartic, teary, I can't believe I just wrote it and this is the end. It is a little painful. When I finished Stay a Spell, which I'm not sure if you're familiar, that is another series of mine. It's rom-com paranormal. It's about 6 witch sisters in New Orleans. But I wrote those for years. Like I was with this family for a long time. And that is actually the series that I finally started to really kind of build readers and a fan base. And so there were a lot of great readers who were like, they loved them as much as I do. And we'd have conversations at book cons. Well, what is she going to do now? I'm like, I don't know. We're going to have to see, like they became real to me. And I'm sure that's the same for so many authors. I'm not saying anything new. But I do, again, remember when I finished it, I cried. And I just like, and it just sounds like, that's so silly. They're imaginary characters and whatever. But more than that, I think I have this feeling of both. I always get this catharsis, this cathartic feeling. Like, yes, that feels so good. Like it's just the way it was supposed to be. They got their HEA. They're going to have the most wonderful life together now. That all of the evil and the wickedness is done. They're going to have their moment and they're going to live their lives. And so there's like this just weird, I guess, juxtaposition of joy and both sadness that I have to say goodbye to old friends. And like, I'm only going to get to see them when I get to talk about them with people like you guys. And other than that, like they're out of my life and I need to think about the next ones. So yeah, it's weird. It's weird. I never really thought about that. Interesting question. Thank you, Sarah.
It's also, I think, interesting that it's the same experience on this side. Maybe not as deep, but like just as powerful. Maybe not as longitudinal, but just as like impactful.
Yeah, and I think that's for readers, for like deep readers, like most romance readers. And it's so funny. What I love about romance is I love the whole falling in love part. I love the conflict, the falling in love, the resolving the conflict, whatever that is, whether it's physical or the outside world or whatever, and then finding that love. And then I'm almost like a junkie. I'm like, okay, now the next one. Like I've got to get to, I want to feel that again. And I do that by reading, but I also do that by writing. And I just have so much fun. I love writing. So as long as my brain is good enough, I'm going to keep telling stories.
Good.
We'll keep consuming them.
Yeah. I am curious on that note about like jumping to the next one. In switching between romance pairings for the first two books, well, and the third one too, obviously, is it hard for you to transition while you're maintaining the plot, the overarching plot of the first book, but changing characters? Was it hard to shift into their heads? Did you have to do anything different to get into Leela's mindset, for example, which is darker than Melina's? What's that like for you?
Good question. So for me, I like specifically in trilogies or in my series, I like for the characters to all be very different so that when I'm approaching them, I'm like, okay, well, she's an introvert, so she's going to behave a certain way. She's not going to behave like this one over here, Leela and Melina. Melina is definitely not an introvert. She's like the reckless wild girl. She's the wild sister, right? Yeah. So she's always mouthing off and speaking too quickly and that kind of thing. Leela is a thinker and a watcher, and she's maternal, and all of those things she had before she was in this position she is in Rome, so I just think about the personalities, and once I go in, it's very different. And same with book 3, totally different personalities. So I don't struggle with going into the character, but I will say I'm always slow when I'm writing at the beginning of the book because I'm trying to find their voice. Do you know what I mean? So that is probably the biggest struggle that I have, is that I'm always slow at the beginning, and then once I've got it, I'm there.
One thing, I'm just curious how conscious the consideration was, but I am obsessed with birth order and siblings. I always have been. Don't know what about it. I find the ways that personality traits manifest in birth order very fascinating.
Right.
And I'm curious how intentional that was when you created the story of the sisters. It was really fascinating to me to see that prologue, or like in the beginning of Firebird, we got to see them all together and their dynamic and the way that they interact with each other. Was that a conscious effort when you thought of who these characters ended up becoming in terms of their place in the family dynamic? Because it very naturally became that way if that wasn't conscious for you.
Yeah, definitely. I picked Melina so she's the middle child, and so she behaves a bit crazy, and she doesn't think very much about her actions. She just does whatever. And so to me, that's a lot of the second child. The second child is always very different. And the first child in most families tends to be more reserved, tends to automatically be the protector of the siblings. So it was very natural for Leela to be maternal. I also think about their conflicts, though, because it was perfect in a bad way, I guess, that Leela was the one who was taken into Rome by an evil master. And because of her personality, she is quieter. She is more introverted. She is, she's also the perfect, beautiful one. And so she's being treated like an object because of her beauty. All of those things play a part in her manifesting her own power and coming into that. I guess her transformation, because we talked a little bit about that. It's like, that was very important. It would be a totally different story if Melina was the one in Bloodsinger and Leela was the one in Firebird. So yeah, I definitely thought about that. I think about those things a lot. Personalities and characterization is probably one of the most important things to me. I love world building. I absolutely love world building. But the most important thing is to know my characters. And so I do spend a lot of time thinking about them, just in the shower, in the car, and sometimes it's interesting you say that, because I will have lines. So I just sent a proposal to my publisher and I'm not going to tell you what it is, but
Darn
I
it.
had the hero of the first book talk to me the other night, just like say something. I'm like, oh, I need to go write that. So before I ever even put pen to paper, which is not a thing, before I ever typed anything, I've thought about them for a while and their personalities and how that's going to play out. And I tend to do opposites. You'll probably,
Yes.
almost every one of my books you'll read, they're opposites. Just because I find that makes it more interesting. And funny. It's funny sometimes. I mean, we don't have a lot of humor in these books, but in my others, it can sometimes be really humorous.
It's funny that you even just said that, like called that out. I feel like we're on some telepathic like connection because I was thinking like when you think of Julian and Melina, Julian is the responsible, like kind of stoic, thinks, you know, he's been living a charade for so long, and Melina is like the exact opposite. Just reacts first, thinks later.
Yeah.
It comes through in the relationship, and then same thing with Leela. I was saying Layla, so my brain is gonna have a minute to adjust. But
That's
same thing
okay.
with Leela and Trajan. I was saying Trajan.
That's okay. It's fine. Say it however you want to say it. It doesn't matter.
But same thing with them too. Like you can just see it so naturally because we do have the little, you know, the more carefree. Of course, we know that he's not as carefree as he initially comes across as. You know, he's got like something behind the curtains there, but like
Definitely more playful.
More playful, where you've got Leela, who's a little bit more, you know, used to being responsible, used to being reserved, used to being quiet and meek and whatever.
Yeah.
So
it's just what Leela needed, though. You know, she needed a man like him who was not, you know, too brutish and was playful and could tease her a little bit because she's so serious and has been in such darkness for so long. She needed that. I love that you found that. So it's probably because my husband and I are that way. We are definitely total opposites in personality. I'm like the emotional, sensitive Cancer. I tend to be more introverted a lot of the time, even though I speak a lot and I do a lot of speaking, but I need that downtime to recharge. I need complete silence before I can go and do events and things like that. My husband is an Aries, so get back, okay? Different. He is loud, he is boisterous, he is funny. That's why I fell in love with him. He's so funny and he's really smart. I like smart guys. So yeah, and so I think because our relationship works so well in that regard that we balance each other, and sometimes conflict, don't understand, like, what the hell are you talking about? Like, because like I would do it this way, yeah, I would do it this way, because different people see things different ways. He doesn't understand because he doesn't see things the way she does, or she doesn't get it. Why is he being such a bastard? He has no idea what you're thinking and why you're thinking that. So yeah, it makes it more interesting for me. So I think probably almost every book I've written has been an opposites attract.
It works out well. It's a good formula for.
Yay.
Yeah.
I'm glad.
Even like I just thought of this now, but even the side characters, like when we have Rhea and Doro, their personalities are also very different.
Very different. Rhea's just a little spitfire, and Doro's just this big gentle giant,
Yeah.
Yes, I love that. And even Stephanos and Ivo, in Firebird, they're just they're buddies, but like it's like those opposites. I don't know. There's something so endearing to me. Have y'all seen the Knights of Seven Kingdom? The Seven Kingdom?
Not yet.
Okay, I'm a big Game of Thrones fan. If you had anything fantasy, I'm going to be watching. But to see those two, Duncan and Egg, together, it's like they're so opposites. They are adorable. They are adorable together. I love it so much.
I keep hearing that they are just iconic.
They are.
Characters.
It is fantastic. It is fantastic. I'm so sad it's over. But yeah, to me, that's what really gets me excited to write the characters, when they don't quite understand each other.
Yeah.
On the topic of I consume all things fantasy, is there any series that you've been reading lately?
As far as reading, I love, of course, she's a good friend of mine, Zoe Draven's Horde King series. I'll go and reread those a lot. Some of those are comfort reads for me. She's so funny. She's a sci-fi writer. I'm like, no, you're not. You're a fantasy writer. Like, they're totally fantasy. the Horde King is loosely based off Khal Drogo and Game of Thrones, and so y'all should totally check them out.
Okay. Yes. Say no more.
Yeah. Right now I'm reading an arc of Katie Roberts' next book, and it's really cool. It's a dystopian, which I love those. I love those. So I'm really enjoying that.
Okay, we'll definitely have to keep an eye out for that one.
Yeah.
Then
we are on the dystopian train. We've recognized and noted the rise of the dystopian over the last year or so. It's really becoming in the industry. It's just maybe it's because we like it, so it's just like
one of my other friends was saying that, and I was like, is it on the way up? So here's a fun fact: one of my first series, the one I was talking to you about earlier, Forge and Fire, and the series that comes right after it is Dominion, and that's when the angels and demons are fighting on Earth. It's kind of been off the market for a while. I just finally got all the rights back from my former publisher, and my German artist for Firebird, and I want to show you this cover here. Look at this.
Oh my gosh.
Isn't that beautiful? Even their edges are gorgeous.
And the edges.
I know.
Oh my goodness.
It's insane. It's so beautiful. But she's really talented. And after she did this one, I just had her redo the covers for both the Vessel Trilogy and Dominion, and they are so beautiful. And I'm re-releasing those. And it's all dystopian. So if anybody's interested or curious.
I'm so curious. Obviously, I loved these books, and I was like, I need to discover so much more. I was looking through your books, and I was like, there's so much to consume.
Where do we start?
I need to get that reader list done on my website so people know what series are connected with what, So what tends to happen with me as an indie, I'll start a series and then I'll finish it and I'll be like, I'm not quite done. I need to go back into that world. And I'll go back in, And so I'll have two series that are in the same world.
Fun for us readers when you get a second series in the same world. So it's like, it's over, but like, there's more.
Right. There's a next generation or there's something else coming.
But those reading guides are really important for us because it can be like, that's so common with fantasy now that there's multiple series in the same world and you have to know where you're starting.
And for me, I've been publishing since 2014, but people are just starting to discover my books now. And so, there's a lot behind me that I need to kind of get organized. So I'll get on that.
Well, I'm very excited to see those new covers too.
I'm very excited. You mentioned for book 3, we've got some Germanic influences.
Yes, we do. So I did try to follow history, and it was the Visigoths who toppled Rome. Which is one of the many Germanic tribes, but there were lots of Germanic tribes. Like the Saxons were Germanic, and I think we always think of the Saxons and the Danes, they're all English. I'm like, no, they were Germans who went and conquered England and took England. That's where they came from. So, but in the ancient time, they were still all in the northern part of my map in the book. And then of course we have Dalmatia is in there, which is modern day Croatia. So. And I just sold the series to Croatia, and they have no idea that book 3 is going to begin in their own country. So it should be fun. Cool. I'm excited.
What does that expansion and success feel like from just looking at where you are now and when you started and that first series that you released? What is your biggest learning lesson, and what would you do maybe differently, or what do you recognize now as integral to your story and you wouldn't change a thing?
Number 1, don't give up. This is a very tough industry. It is not for the weak. It is not for the thin-skinned. And I have lots of advice, so hang tight. So first, we're going to talk about this part. So in college, I majored in creative writing. I have a degree in creative writing and literature. So I would sit in a room where people would just come in and just bash your work. Everybody go home, they'd come in and be like, oh, well, this sucked and whatever, So that was kind of a learning curve on how to take criticism, right? I feel like that is the only thing that I worry a lot about sometimes first of all, the ease of indie publishing is wonderful. It saved me. I'm just going to say that. But I worry sometimes people jump the gun to publish too quickly without doing the proper work on craft and all of those things and being able to take criticism. And I'll give you an example. I've been writing books for like I said, many, many years. I've written over 30 books. When I initially wrote The Wraith King, which is my most recent indie series that I'm currently working on alongside this series, my beta readers, they loved everything from like basically, you know, they're like the last 2/3 are great. The beginning's a little slow, whatever. Like you could probably just tweak it a little bit here and there and it'd be fixed. And I was like, yeah, but that's not going to be good enough. So I ended up having to postpone the release, and I cut 12 chapters. I rewrote a third of the book.
Oh, wow.
You know,
Wow.
and this is after me writing and publishing books like, you know, back to back to back for many years. So I think you have to be open to, you're never going to be perfect, and not every story you write is going to be perfect. You need to do the work. Okay. So that is my biggest thing, is don't like take all the criticism to heart, but also don't go to Goodreads and take criticism from strangers. Like, you know, when I mean that, I mean like an editor or someone legitimately who you know is reading it to help you, you know,
Right.
On your side kind of thing.
right, right. Because that's a whole nother thing. You have to find those you can trust. It is art. This is an art form. You know, storytelling is an art form, and that's what you're doing. And so it's very difficult to have someone say, "Oh, your art sucks," you know, or whatever. And they're going to do that regardless, even after you've all the work you've done and you put it out there. You're going to get 1 and 2 stars. You're going to get tons of them, and then you're going to get tons of 4s and 5s. So you know, it's just, you have to be ready to take the bad with the good. The other advice I would give is to be tenacious about not giving up. So when I say never give up, I also mean like believe in yourself and your own abilities. And I don't know if that's because I'm a little bit older than you guys. And when I started publishing an indie, it was still taboo. It was like, oh, well, you're not a real author. You're one of those indie authors, you know? So there was a lot of taboo feelings about that, negative feelings and wrong feelings, because it's doubly hard than it is to be a traditionally published author.
Definitely.
And so I finally kind of got fed up, and I had this idea for these 6 sisters in New Orleans, the Stay a Spell series. I was like, well, I want to do my covers totally myself, because people had been doing my covers and I was tired of that. I wanted to do something very different for paranormal, because they're all witches and they fall in love with werewolves and vampires and stuff. And
Love it.
and it's all rom-com-y, it's all character driven, so it feels very contemporary romance, because it's just very romance and relationship centric, and the magic's very light.
Okay.
So I really was focused on that, and for all the sisters to be very different, so they all have very different personalities. And I wanted covers that had like typography and pretty hand-drawn elements, and at the time, not a soul was creating those covers. And now they're everywhere. But and I did, and that was the series that has launched my entire career.
Okay.
Wow.
But I had written and published about 15 books before that.
Wow.
So, yeah. So that's what I'm saying. Like, you just don't know. And I have had friends that have given up, or just were like, maybe this isn't for me. I don't know if I do this, you know, kind of thing. But I'm a writer. Like, I'm definitely, it's ingrained in me. I never want to stop writing. Like I said, like, I'm taking all the vitamins I can. I want my brain to be top notch so I can write as long as I can and create stories, because it's just so fun to me. And then you get letters from people who are like, I read this book when my mom was in the hospital and it just got me through, and things like that. And there are so many wonderful things that have happened to me as an author, just personally, personal connections I made with readers that are just blessings, you know? And so there's a lot beyond money or success to do this for, you know, to go this hard road, because it is difficult. It's difficult in so many different ways, but those are my top things. Please work on your craft. Don't give up, and believe in yourself. And I mean that sincerely, not just, you know, go believe. I mean, really take it to heart, because it was actually Wolf Gone Wild that Monique Patterson read and then reached out to me. Monique Patterson was the head editor and is now the director of Bramble for Tor.
Okay.
Wow.
To get that email saying, hi, you know, would you like to work with us? Would you like to do a book? I mean, that I never thought in a million years that would happen to me. Originally, she wanted some fun paranormal rom-com, and I was like, well, I'm sure I could come up with something, but I've got this idea about dragons in Rome I'd like to pitch, you know, and that's what happened. It's changed my life. You know, it's like every step of the way, I'm like, this changed my life and this changed my life. But I don't know. I would love to say that I wish I'd never made those mistakes in the early years, but I also feel like it would not make me as tenacious as I am now. It's like those hard lessons you learn, you know? So.
Yeah.
They're there for a reason.
Exactly.
It's all part of the path kind of thing, which is my personal philosophy, I suppose.
We think alike a lot, Sarah.
I think we do, yeah. The telepathy.
Kindred spirits.
The kindred spirits, yeah.
It is.
Yeah. I think about this all the time because Kyla and I met through books, and I think about how vulnerable it is as an author to put your work out there and to have it be someone else's and open to their opinion on it and stuff like that. That's a very brave thing to do. It takes a lot of courage. And even Kyla and I, when we talk about books, we don't always agree on what we liked or what resonated with us, but I also think that's the beauty of reading, is that one thing is not going to appeal to everyone. That's not the point. The point is to find your tribe, to find what appeals to you and someone else, and then bond over that. And we have, I don't know, I love the community, this community.
I love this community. Absolutely love it. I 100% agree with you. I read certain books because I love them, and I write certain books because I love that same thing, you know, and those people, we find each other. There's a lot of wonderful good that comes from being a romance writer. I know it gets knocked by the greater literary world, whatever. I don't care about them. But it helps people. It really does. It helps women. It empowers women. I like the sex positivity that comes from it.
Yeah.
I like the sisterhood, the friendships, the things you can even learn about yourself. Maybe if you resonate really well with a certain character, it's like, oh, you know, like I've had those moments myself in reading romance.
Yeah.
So, and as a whole, the community is fantastic. So
it really is. Yes. That is one thing about romance, that the characters are always working through their own internal problems and struggles as well. And so if you find a character that you resonate with, it's like, it's not a guide to figuring out your own life, but it's like, I'm not alone in this. And here's a proof that you can work through it, kind of.
I wish it was a guide. Imagine a dragon just swooped in and saved you the day for you. That sounds great.
Yeah.
I know. Yeah, I love living in my head. It's so much more fun.
Yes, definitely. Well, yes, that was amazing advice. So thank you so much for that.
You're welcome.
So just before we wrap up, I guess on a closing note, you can't obviously tell us very much about book 3. Is there, like, you know, if you could give us like a word or like a teaser, just a little teaser or something, is that something you can do?
I would say beware of the shades and the shadows.
Ooh. Okay.
All right.
Okay. Ominous.
That is ominous. That's a great line.
Yeah. Can't believe you just pulled that out.
I mean, I can't, but then I can, because an ode to your skills.
I'm so excited for y'all. Book 3. Oh my God. Okay.
So are we.
Before we say goodbye and close things up, I think that our listeners will walk away with a little bit more intrigue about Juliette Cross. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about where we can find you, how we can engage with you, and what we should be looking at in terms of updates and releases in your world?
Yes. So I'm on Instagram, and I'm sometimes on Facebook, but I also have a newsletter. You can sign up through my website, and I only do a monthly newsletter. So it's not like I'm spamming people all the time. And I always give you like a writing update, an update with my life, what I'm doing at the moment. It tells you, and it will list all the things with some pretty graphics and links and things that if you're interested in what else is going on. And I'm not really on TikTok, but I'm about to be. So it's so interesting you asked me this. So my daughter, Noelle, is also my assistant. She's my PA. We were thinking about finally getting on TikTok with some fun videos of us together and just what life is like over here, for Juliette. So
for Juliette, we love it. We love to hear it. We are so excited. I know that we'll be following along, and we're so thankful for your time today.
Well, thank you. Y'all were fabulous. I had so much fun today.
Of course. Bloodsinger Book 2 in the Fire That Binds series is out now, and you can read it, catch up on Lila's story, and carry on in this world. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you.